Hey folks, welcome to Code and Concrete, where we share the latest trends and the stories of trailblazers in the built environment. We hope you gain some insight from our wide range of topics such as real estate development and sustainability, or blockchain, artificial intelligence, and data. Joining us today is Ben Larson. Ben is the CEO of Arizona Desert CAD Services. Ben's worked in the semiconductor field since 2005 in roles such as electrician and steam fitter, general foreman, and the superintendent of design. On the side, he is the architectural engineering and construction advisor for Building Inc. and industrial expertise advisor for LV8R Labs. Ben, this is really exciting to have you on the show. This is going to be like a crash course 101, I imagine, for people exploring CAD and BIM.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking on the role of advisor for building and helping us and our clients understand a lot of those architectural engineering and construction requirements for a project.
Absolutely, and it's been a pleasure joining the team and just being a part of something big. And I'm really excited to continue on our path that we've already started on.
I guess one way to open this up is, why does a company like us even need an AEC advisor? Because you would think a lot of real estate projects and professionals are already using the best technology. But a recurring theme in this podcast, honestly, is that technology adoption and best practices lag when it comes to real estate development. And so I want to, take a look inside of your day-to-day job where, you've been a BIM superintendent, but that's very unique. Where do you see the gap between projects that, historically have been pen and paper and those that are starting to use more technologies, BIM practices, and, computer-aided design?
Well, I would say that the old pen and paper method is kind of, it's not necessarily outdated. It still works. But this is way better to put things in a third dimension and add elevation, just simply for the coordination of space. And it also gives you the opportunity to do offsite manufacturing. And I would say that the technology is not up and coming. It's been here since mid-90s, but it's not as widely adopted as I originally thought that it was. In the semiconductor and, industrial setting, anything similar to industrial, you're going to have a complete BIM model with everybody's input in it. And it seems that bringing it down to more of a residential or maybe light commercial, it's not as acceptable. It's being really, really pushed back on. And what I'd like to do is just bring it more into the smaller, light commercial things that we're starting with, and hopefully get it just as widely adopted as it is in an industrial setting right now.
Yeah, because I would say, as we talk to real estate developers and I try to explain why they might want to use BIM on a smaller project, even though they're not building massive infrastructure or a super data-rich environment, it still has its benefits, whether it's BIM itself or just at least some computer-aided design, right? We don't have to live in sort of the prehistoric Stone Age when it comes to building the built world. And there just seems to be a lot of hesitancy where they might say, we don't know what a digital twin is. We don't see a need for BIM. I don't even know anyone who talks about this. Why do you think that those smaller projects aren't using it? Is it because it hasn't been required up until now? It's too expensive? They don't know the right specialized or specialists?
I don't think that they understand the value that it brings just in offsite manufacturing and coordination. Just saving the money is what they're missing. They've done it this way for 40, 50 years, and they're good with it. They're not looking to improve on their process, right? They're making what they're making, and they're okay and comfortable there. And I think the more that it is adopted, the cheaper we can really make construction because of just the money that you're saving and not having to do rework. Now, in the industrial setting, if you Like if you were to miss a dimension on 20-inch carbon steel, and if you only missed it by a half inch, that's still going to cost that company $20,000-$30,000, right? Just to get that half inch made up somehow. And that's between everybody's time it takes to get that correction communicated, coordinated, passed down. It's at least $20,000 or $30,000, not to mention the material, the shop time, the weld time. On a 20-inch 90, it's going to take you 3 hours to weld it out. So, and that's just your welder and your fitter's time. So I think the more that it's adopted, the more it's going to save us. So if we could bring this down to, affordable housing is kind of a big thing in the market right now. If there was something laid out in BIM that you could coordinate back and forth and make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, you could slam that house together even quicker, faster, cheaper. And nobody's really trying to adopt it because they see the upfront cost instead of the savings at the end. When you're looking at bidding a project, you're kind of putting that bid on best case scenario, right? So nobody really quantifies the savings because you don't necessarily see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, there are incentives for the larger projects because the cost of being wrong really quickly accumulates. But on the smaller projects, they might be able to get away with some issues, or it's overlooked, and then it just becomes the current owner or next owner's problem. And there's not really any penalties there. So, that's one component. Can we save money? But then there's also the accelerating. And it seems like more education and just widespread adoption. If, let's keep up with the Jones, they're doing it. This is their practice. We might as well implement it here, because we start to realize that our timelines can be shortened. Therefore, budgets, we stay within budget. Projects are delivered. We can scale faster. And, I was having a conversation the other day about the housing shortage, where we are simply not building fast enough, and using new procurement and fabrication methods could really rapidly accelerate how quickly we can put together houses. And this was something you just mentioned about being able to fabricate, so I guess kind of walk us through that, some of those benefits.
It's really interesting. Down here, there is a contractor who is using labor out of the Department of Justice, right? They're giving people inside the penitentiary a skill, but they're handing them plans, and these people are building walls inside the penitentiary, shipping the wall out, and they're putting up houses, all these tract homes that are going up. That's how they're starting to prefab their tract homes. And it's as far as I know, it's been a really highly successful project because you're controlling your labor costs, obviously, which is unfortunate for them, but they're also gaining a skill to get out there in the world. And it is prefab construction, so it's making it cheaper. They'll ship an entire house framed up on the back of a truck, deliver it to the job site, and they're literally just standing up walls and nailing them together. If we can take that same idea and go to any fab shop and have all of your fabrication built and delivered to the job site, you're not having to deal with all of the paperwork issues, all of the safety issues, all of, the boss standing over you screaming, people not knowing what to do. This should all be planned out in BIM prior to starting a construction project. It just adds so much value that I don't understand why it's not widely adopted, other than nobody's practiced it, right? And like I was saying earlier, the savings that you don't actually include in your bid, because it's nothing that you're going to know is coming up. So nobody really can quantify the back end savings as much as we would like to, right? Just because we don't know what kind of issues are going to come up.
Right. There's a lot of variables there. When you're talking about shipping, essentially components of a finished build and then putting them together on site, a comparison that someone made to me was the way that we build cars. You don't send a team of engineers to someone's driveway where they assemble it there. These are done in factories where the oversight is much easier, right? You're overseeing the manufacturing of all these parts. You can check for issues. There's less liability when it comes to safety. And then all you have to do is transport that, put the items together. And so to me, it makes a lot of sense. And this is where you start to see there's a differentiation in innovation when it comes to technology. We can talk about computers and tokenization, but then there's also practices. Like, we need to literally change how people and ideas move in the industry. And that seems to be the dichotomy of BIM. It's not just about technology and computers. It's about changing how we think and operate.
Yes. But the gentlemen that run your construction site generally are older, well set in their ways. And it's really hard to change somebody when they already have an ego, because 3 jobs ago, they nailed it, right? Mm-hmm. They know exactly what they're doing. And there's a really big ego issue as far as construction is concerned, just because the people running the project have been doing it for 30, 40 years, and they know what they're doing, and that's how they're going to do it. And you're not going to change their mind.
What's the real solution to that? Is it just time?
So the real solution, yes, it would be all of the younger gentlemen coming up are obviously helping. All of the adding female workers to the workforce in construction has been a big movement in the past 10 years. That's been helping. More ideas, getting in front of your superintendents and up and explaining to them the value that you see is going to be key to moving anything, obviously, right? So I think that and Building Inc. may be the answer here.
Well, that's what we want to do with our efforts and this podcast, right? We want to have conversations about changes occurring, and maybe there's real estate developers out there that, haven't considered changing their practices. They did it one way, they were profitable, and they want to rinse and repeat, but an upfront investment into new technology or a specialist or a platform like building could amplify the amount of return that they have at the end of not just one project, but every project afterwards. So we want to get the word out. A good place to start getting that word out, let's define some of the words. So we have CAD and we have BIM. Break down CAD and maybe if you want to show what was CAD like, 20 years ago, how has it changed, and where's it being applied in projects now that it wasn't before?
So when it originally came out, it was really cumbersome to use because you had lines and circles and triangles, right? And you had to physically draw out anything that you wanted in the model. And that's why we started with an LOD 100, right? Your level of detail 100 is just lines and sticks, right? And then as you go through 200, 300, 350, 400, right, you're going to get more and more detailed to the point where everybody's starting to expect an LOD 400, where it's accurate dimensions, accurate depictions, right? It's no longer a box for a valve. Now you have to use an actual valve that looks that way, that has the same dimensions, the same diameters. That's kind of highly important for all of this.
Right. To go beyond basic drawings, because you can make the technological leap going from paper to a computer design, but if the computer is still as simplistic as the paper, then you've just added a technological or educational requirement for the people designing your buildings. It seems that over the years, only when we were able to add more levels of detail, that using a computer actually became cost effective because of the amount of information that was coming in for these designs and drawings.
And what's really helped us is things like CAD MEP fabrication, where you can build these parts, right? You build this one single part and you can select it and drop it in every time. It's no longer put each line for each part. Now you can build your part and it slaps onto your fittings and your piping and your conduit right where it needs to look just like the field. And now we're coming out with an LOD 600, 700, where you can build the schedule in and make a little video of your entire project getting built. And now we're getting into 700, where it's the whole life cycle of your, the life cycle, of your project. And then at the end, you can demo things out and wind up rebuilding the entire space in the same program, same file. So it is exponentially getting better. And what I'm really excited is when you can build your BIM model and actually have the building work and give you an outcome of what's going on inside the building. When we can actually make a model run and bring back data for us to go through and analyze, that's what I'm going to be excited for. And I don't think we're very far from it. We're getting closer and closer by the year.
And it seems to me that's the natural outcome. If we want to create a digital environment where we can first simulate the development of the asset, we might as well continue to model and simulate it in real time based off of that information, which I would imagine is being collected by IoT sensors that are giving a real-time report that's then viewable in this 3D model that we once curated but is now being updated for that property. Because there's got to be some sort of time differential. We design the property, you have a 3D model, and then it turns out it's not reflective of on-site, and it's not reflective 10 years from now, and suddenly that digital twin becomes obsolete.
Correct. And that was the LOD 700, is you're changing things out in the model while you're changing real world things out, right? And generally it's going to be your MEP, mechanical, electrical, and process piping, plumbing, things like that are actually designed to wear out your pumps, your motors, your things that will actually mechanically go wrong over time. Your LOD 700 should be where you delete those things out of the model, input the new one that was installed, and that will continue keeping your value up to date.
Right. Why go through the hassle of creating this comprehensive digital twin and then it's not useful after 6 months or after a year because something has already changed?
Go to crap. Yeah, it does not make sense. So
Right. Well, let's look at the life cycle then of a BIM model. Let's start from scratch. Real estate developer has a vision for a property. Who are they hiring? What software are they using? And then how do they start designing?
And that's really funny because the earlier you get your design team on board and looking at a project, the better the project turns out every single time without fail. When you tell your design team that there's not enough money for them to get in there yet, that's when your project starts having issues, is at the very beginning when they tell you the money's not there for you yet, right? And that is absolutely integral to having a job run right. So if you get your designers in at the very beginning, they do the field walks, they go with, the general contractor and do all the meetings. After they've got a decent handle on it, your engineers are going to put out a drawing, and it's going to be a 2D piece of paper that you get. And you have to figure out where all of this is going to fit in your building so that you're not hitting the electricians or the plumbers or anybody else in there, right? So start on square one, get your guys in there. Obviously, it's going to have to do with the engineers putting together like a basic 2D package for you. And then after that, you hand it to your design guys. They'll take that 2D, read through it, understand it as much as they can, based on how early in the project they were included. And you just kind of lay it in there to the best of your knowledge. And if there's something in your way, you should be able to click on who's in your way and go ahead and call them and see if you can figure out something one-on-one. If not, call a meeting, right? Everybody has this stigma that meetings are useless. Meetings are useless when you expect them to be useless, right? Meetings have a lot of importance and value if you get in there and participate in the meeting. When you're sitting in the back not doing anything, that meeting's not going to be worth anything to you, you know? So that was my thing, was I'd get in there, I'd schedule a meeting, and I'd get 8 of us in the room talking about the 4 issues that we know of and just give everybody their action required, give them their AR, and have, delegate who's going to move and why. And a lot of this is based on size, right? So your ductwork guys are huge, right? And then your piping guys are the next biggest, right? They'll have 10-inch cast iron going through a building or something. And then your electricians, right? If you do it in order of size, because really all you're doing is scheduling your space to be inside the building. So order of size, biggest to smallest. I know everybody thinks they're more important than everybody else, right? And that's why I came up with doing it by size instead of, who thinks they're more important. It just made more sense to me. After all the coordination and everything's said and done, you would take your 3D model, break it out into smaller pieces that we call spools, and make your shop drawings, send that to the shop for OSM, and then once the offsite manufacturing is done, they'll ship it back, and pretty much your designers are kind of on the sidelines at that point, right? Waiting for the installers to put it in. And then if there's ever an issue, your design team needs to be immediately responsive in order to keep the field working. You have to feed that baby. Got to feed the baby, right? You have to make sure that they have work in front of them and they understand what's going on, why it needs to be there.
So if I were to review from my own understanding, because I can certainly start to visualize how this is coming together. We're starting with very basic dimensions of a building. This is an idea. We want to build something here. What's the land? How many units do we possibly want? What are the building codes, the limitations of what we can build? Then we pull in a design team and we say, all right, we want to go from lines on paper to actually ideating what a building looks like. Where are the windows? Where are the doors? What does an interior look like? And then what are all the things that are overlooked? We have our mechanical, we have our plumbing and electrical. And this is where you start going from basic LOD to something more comprehensive that understands the overlap of these elements. And I think you were starting to describe clash and how we need to mediate that, because we can design a property, but we can design it wrong. And just because there's a computer doesn't mean that everything meets the laws of physics or makes sense on a job site. So just real briefly, could you touch on what clash is and where it most often arises?
So a clash would be any time that you have obstacles in your way that you're going to hit with piping, or maybe there's a wall that you need to penetrate and you need to put in some sort of penetration there. So a clash is quite literally just anything that you're hitting that somebody else owns that you shouldn't be. And there are some really excellent tools. Autodesk has Navisworks, which is a great tool for clash detection. There's room for improvement on it, because sometimes your piece of pipe is more like an octagon rather than a circle, and it'll count all 8 faces as a clash, right? So there's some work that Autodesk can do in that clash detection. And then, it's very important to do your clash detection, make sure that you're coordinating and getting out of everybody's way. Because you could have a beautiful gas highway, but if you're hitting one piece of ductwork, your gas highway is useless, right?
What are consequences of clash? So let's say that I have not properly modeled and phased this building, and now I have clash. What are the repercussions? What are the costs?
The repercussions are going to be obviously an ass chewing, first of all, right? Because everything we do starts there. And then repercussions are just going to be the amount of time it takes to remodel that unless you're further in the process. If you've already got shop drawings out, that turns into a 911 of where are we at in the process. Immediately stop that drawing from going any further or being built. And it's literally just an all stop for everybody until you can get it figured out. So whatever money that you have wasted between getting your spools and your shop drawings out, getting the shop moving on it, getting your material there, if your material has to change for something, that's a big issue. And it's just like I was talking about the 20-inch carbon steel, man, it is so expensive to do anything out there these days that anytime you can make something go right, it doesn't even have to be perfect. It just has to be right. The better off you are. All starts with getting design in first.
Right. The consequence of rework is, I mean, that's, if you don't clash detect properly, then you are going to have to redo something. And the later down the line, the later that's detected, the more costly this becomes. And this is why a lot of projects move off of their designated timelines.
Right.
Among many variables, let's say it's not financed properly. But why are people hesitant to finance? Well, oftentimes it's because they know there's going to be problems on the job site, and that increases risk. Maybe the project can't even come to full fruition because it's just managed so poorly. And so to me, what we're talking about here, BIM, best practices, and CAD, is in a sense de-risking the design and construction phases of a real estate asset.
Yes. And I think to really get it adopted, it might be worth it to start it at the insurance company level, right? If you can push on the insurance company the importance of de-risking through CAD and BIM, I think they could force the adoption of BIM processes on all light commercial and heavy residential.
And it seems like that's happening in Europe a little bit, where they've been a little bit more adamant about golden thread concepts. So carrying information throughout the life cycle of an asset and utilizing BIM in their construction practices. Maybe the US is a little bit behind. However, if we get those large institutions or municipal bodies behind the concepts, like you mentioned, this is a good top-down approach to rolling out BIM in CAD.
Yes, I suppose they would be a little bit ahead of the US. They have the ISO 19650 and the golden thread. These are concepts that they're talking about over there across the pond that we are not here. We've got IBC International Building Code, which is very similar to their ISO 19650. It's just the US version. And golden thread is not a concept that I heard until I got involved with BIM Heroes and around the worldwide BIM community rather than just nationwide. So yeah, these are things that we are not discussing here in America nearly often enough. Just like BIM and CAD in general, right? It's just not here to stay enough yet, but we are moving that direction.
Yeah, and I don't think people are talking enough about ISO. In fact, we should quickly define what the International Organization for Standardization is. It does have uses in all sorts of industries. For example, airplanes have to abide by ISO compliance, particularly because they're international, right? You're flying these jets between countries. And so we want some sort of standardization. We can't have a huge gap between how things are developed in the US or Asia, in Europe and Africa. We need unity in that way. What are some of the, how is ISO being used in real estate?
Well, like I said, we've got International Building Code here. So ISO is not necessarily being used in real estate in America, but overseas, they're using it for code. That's their Bible. That's how they build buildings. And I would certainly agree with you that if we brought ISO compliance to America instead of holding on to our international building code standards, it would be very advantageous for any large contractor to be able to go overseas and do the same thing there that they are here and know what they're doing, not have to restudy, not have to know the differences between the two codes. I think it would be advantageous if we all got onto one international standard. But again, is that International Building Code or is that International Safety Organization or International Standard Organization?
Yeah, there's some big questions to pose there. But I think a lot of people, not even contractors, let's say investors who are investing across borders would like to see some of that standardization. How was this asset developed? And if it hasn't been developed yet, what are the contractors going to do, right? Whose rules are they abiding by so that whether I'm investing in Hong Kong or Canada or Ireland, I know that best practices are being deployed. The project will be on time. It's going to be compliant. And then when it's being operated, it's done so with optimization and efficiency, and my investment is safe. That confidence doesn't really exist right now. And it feels like that standardization is so necessary. It's overdue.
But it almost feels like that confidence could come from your BIM department, right? I mean, if I was an insurance company, right? If I was an insurance broker, I would want to make sure that I de-risked as much as I could for an entire project. And it seems like BIM is really the answer to that on either standard, because they're both so similar that, it wouldn't take much to get them both to combine as one. And through that and the use of BIM, I think it really brings everything together. It de-risks the asset. There's a hard stigma around it that it's just cost. Well, no, it's just cost in the front end, right? It's the savings in the back end that you really wind up realizing at the end of a project.
And I think a premium on top of that, if you have ISO compliant, BIM integrated, Class A development, then you have something that attracts capital and tenancy, and or during insurance or refinancing or handover, your asset is treated a lot better. And if we look at what companies like Invenium are doing, they're trying to take traditionally private market assets where there's no rules, whether we're talking arts or private credit or real estate, trying to enforce some sort of consistency so that these assets, these properties, can be treated almost with more respect, would be one way to look at it. And that which is respected is also funded and financed. It just blows my mind that real estate, for as large as the market is, right? This is, I think, $34 trillion in the US or similar, and hundreds of trillions of dollars around the world, that there's lackluster rules. We should have the same rules or the same standardization and expectations as companies on a stock exchange, right? It doesn't matter if I'm investing in a company on the US stock exchange or the Hong Kong stock exchange or the London. I know that that company has to abide by certain rules, the way that they prepare their papers, the way that they hire, the way that they report. And I mean, to be public, you have to be moderately successful. It should be the same way with real estate. This was built in a certain way, it's being operated in a certain way, and it just meets a general level of expectation where people don't lose money.
Right. And the building code does not address things like those. It's quite literally just what needs to happen with the building. And it's very important to me to remind people that that code is written in blood, right? There's no other way to really drive that point home. Your code is there because somebody has passed away from that not being a standard or something looked at, paid attention to, right? Your entire code is written in blood. And that's why it's so important to have the ISO 19650 abroad and International Building Code here. Same thing. There's an international mechanical code that we use. There's the FEC fire code. They're all written in blood, and they are highly important to know that they are being addressed, right? That's the whole point of pulling your permit, walking down with somebody from the city or the municipality. It's just to make sure that these things are taken care of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when we're talking about code, I think this goes back to what the podcast represents. It's not just computer programming code, but it's building codes. It's the expectation of safety and delivery of a real estate product, and we need to push for it. And again, that's what something like a conversation like this is for. We want people to maybe just hear us out, hear this perspective, and see if BIM is a good fit for their property to elevate their current portfolio and to take it to something more sophisticated, data-rich, compliant, safe, within budget and capitalized. I think that's what, is possible through a means like this.
And it's crazy to see the difference being on a project that doesn't have any sort of pre-construction coordination and one that does. They are two totally different animals, right? And one thing that I always heard was the last 10% of the job takes 30% of the budget. Mm-hmm. Without coordination in BIM, that's 100% true. You're going to spend 30% just getting that last 10% of the project together. If you have BIM and coordination, you're spending 20% on the front end, but you're saving all that 30% on the last back end because you've already got it coordinated. You got it figured out. You hit those issues digitally so that when you get to them in the real world, it's already figured out. We've already addressed this. We've already talked about it.
And from your experience, what are some of the issues that arise in the last 10% that are just such a headache?
It could be something as stupid as nobody ordered end caps for the back end of the laterals, right? It could be something as stupid as this is the wrong valve handle color, right? And like things that when you're first designing, right, you're designing on spec. You've got the spec in front of you and your engineer drawings that give you a real good idea of what needs to happen. You're not thinking of things like how many extra nuts is it going to take to mount this to a wall rather than strut, right? And those are things that you wind up hitting later on in coordination. Or maybe like as the electricians, they're only allowed 360 degrees of bends in a conduit run, right? And that getting to that last double offset that you have to make at the end because you forgot at the beginning is highly expensive to do out in the field. Whereas if you coordinate it in CAD or, any sort of CAD design program, you already have that figured out. You're on point. You know exactly where it's going, how many degrees you have to get to your final destination while going around everything. You don't have a guy out in the field bending the same piece of conduit 4 times because he couldn't quite get it in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I want to shift to AZDCS, Arizona Desert CAD Services.
Yes.
When did you originally start this, and what does your day-to-day look like?
So I started this because my old BIM manager called me one day and he said, "Hey, our old company is trying to give away a little bit of work. I'd like to take it, but I kind of need somebody to man it." And I said, "I can start an LLC." 3 months later, I quit that company, right? Just because more laterals were coming, more work was there, things that could get done. My day to day has just turned out to, wake up, go through the schedule, see what needs to be done for the day, and I can get it done wherever I'm at. And, get it done on time, get it done right. And it's really rewarding to know that you are making a difference on a larger project, even though I'm still doing what I'm doing here, right? It's really exciting since COVID and we have, things like Riverside, or we used to have Skype. Now we've got Teams, right? Ever since COVID came out and these things became widely adopted, I can do more sitting at my desk than we could have previously done really sitting in the job trailer. Because generally you're sitting in the job trailer, you've got a guy hand detailing, laying things out. Your modelers should be going out to the field, checking back and forth. Since COVID, though, we can get more done wherever we are than what you could have done sitting in the job trailer pre-COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really cool to watch that unfurl and take off and really be a part of the adoption of these things through contractor.
Yeah,
right?
That's such a phenomenal point. When we start using computerized design, we can work from anywhere and we can communicate so much faster and bring whole people together on these 3D models. And I know that some BIM software lacks a little bit on the collaborative side of things. I think that's being resolved a little bit because for the same reason why LOD 700 makes sense. It just makes sense. This should be done. And to see these super complex models of properties, people can come together and actively discuss, ahead of time, let's design it this way, let's color it this way. Hey, we've picked up some clash here. Get on a call, get on a virtual meeting and talk about how we want to remedy that. I mean, that's an unforeseen benefit as you move towards BIM, digital twins, and CAD. How much time and money can be saved just because we're working remote?
Just because we don't have to go get on a plane to go show somebody these things anymore.
Right.
I mean, it's $600-700 to fly anywhere, and you're saving that money because you can get online and do it over the phone, over your video call, share your screen, show them what you're looking at. And I think the first time that we really tried to do this remote was we have a company that was down here in Arizona. They were from Utah, but they were doing work in Oregon, and everything was still getting done. And it was like the first real use case of we can do this anywhere. We don't have to be on the job site. Furthermore, we have the scanners, right? We have Leica, who's put out an amazing scanner, Trimble, Faro, right? They all have great scanning capabilities where you can lay out 5-6 million points in a matter of 3 minutes and send that to your guy in Austin, Texas, and he can model knowing that he's missing things that are out there in the real world already. So these are amazing tools that allow us to start doing this remote. I can design anything anywhere, and I can do it from my house. So,
and the gap between designing remotely and overseeing the work site remotely, that's closing as well, because you're seeing these cameras and scanners where now you can have off-site foremen, and we're still on track, right? We're looking at our digital twin, we're looking at the job being done. And then after the construction phase, when the property is still being operated, this is where we start thinking, well, how do we remotely oversee assets and many assets simultaneously? And this introduces artificial intelligence, which can start to help with more traditional roles of property management, we can identify, how certain components are functioning, when they need to be replaced without someone tinkering with it or going on site. Same thing with appraisal. When we talk about appraisal, what is this asset worth? Well, you don't necessarily need someone to walk through every single time because we have real-time information being fed to us and our stakeholders anywhere in the world. It's amazing.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And being the LOD 700, it's real time all the time. You are going in there and replacing things that are wearing out, things that are devaluing the property. You can go in and drop a new one into the model, recollaborate all of your data together, and have a brand new real-time value with the new motors, the new pumps, the new fixtures, whatever you change, and it's all right there. We can do it from anywhere in the world at this point. And AI, think about it. We started, if you really think about AI, every search engine was the premature development of AI, right? So now we're getting to the point where we can type a query into a model and come back and have the model tell us how many doors and windows we need to buy, right? It can tally up the price of everything. You tell the computer how much a door or window is, it will tell you how much you just spent on doors and windows. After you get that figure, add in your guy's time, right? Every guy that touches that door or window needs to have time associated to him. And when you do that, you can figure out the real price automatically, immediately. AI returns the figure to you, and it is absolutely phenomenal for, any of your project management team, really. Your estimators, I think we've got a product that your estimators are going to absolutely love that we are building. And it's all has to do with getting AI involved in your data, which is obviously what AI reads, right? Getting AI involved in your data is going to be just amazing in the next few years. And we're trying to do it here live every day,
Right. First building comprehensive models, embedding data in there, having good data, updated data, and then using that. I always say there's 3 things that you can do with data. You can collect it, you can make sure it's good, clean, structured, verified, and then you can use it. And the use cases with high level of detail digital twins, it's the way that we almost start to communicate with the properties themselves. These properties are going to become so complex, they almost, to use Paul Doherty's words, might have personalities where you come to expect certain attributes of a property, and it can communicate to you, hey, something's going wrong here. We need to be on top of this. The amount of cost savings, the amount of intelligence that goes into that, it's going to be revolutionary. I think is a good time to use a word that strong.
Absolutely it is. And the next step past that is they're just going to talk to each other. The buildings will talk to each other, have a trolley system to send supplies back and forth, and they will have their own personality together, communicating as one system or network of buildings that is owned and designed for one thing and one thing only, right? Those buildings will talk to each other and kind of pass supplies around, and it is definitely a pivotal time. I would certainly agree with you on that. It's exciting, super exciting to see all the innovative things that are coming through the pipelines right now. Yeah, things are just about to go crazy.
Yeah, I have to resist going off on a visionary tangent, but when you talk about properties communicating and exchanging goods, I start to think about decentralized physical infrastructure. If you have smart buildings, perhaps they're equipped with solar, and there's a differential between how much energy one asset has and how much another. They can begin to facilitate that, and it can happen almost autonomously. So then you have, if you're a property owner, like passive income for the asset because you're just trading with neighboring assets
And
based
it's
off of
all
what they
and
need.
it's all just economics. It's supply and demand. One building will ship to the next. Let's go. Keep trucking along and doing the buildings thing. Keep building and around.
It's like algorithmic stock trading for properties and energy. It's going to fire off and make money in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Well, as we start to wrap up here, I want to ask, what are you looking forward to in 2025 for AZDCS? What are some of your goals? And likewise, what are your goals with Elevator Labs and building since you're a part of us?
So my goal with AZDCS is to actually support Elevator Labs and Building Inc. through verifying your models, verifying things are in place, they are up to code. And really, I am super excited about Building signing their first client. And I hope the best, and things were just going to launch and take off. As far as Elevator, I'm going to be kind of heading up the department, developing the new product that will be more AI involved. It'll be pretty heavy, but I need it to do certain things that I've wanted for the past 8 years as a superintendent that I could not get. Right? I don't need my project estimator over at my desk 3 times a day for 15 minutes at a time. I need the project estimator to ask the model instead of asking me. And that's really what I'm super excited about with Elevator Labs is we're going to build a product that the estimator can talk to return when it needs to.
Yeah, well, thanks for the little shout out about building. I mean, we've got a growing pipeline of properties. We're talking to real estate developers. And the first hurdle is always that education component because we prompt them with, do you have BIM? And a lot of them say, well, no. And then that sort of disqualifies them. So it's been a little difficult finding who our perfect customer is. It's not very often that startups are disqualifying their customers, right? A lot of startups want as many customers as possible, but to really see this vision through, if we're talking about smart cities and properties communicating and digital twins and predictive maintenance, there's a baseline expectation of how much data is flowing through a property. And we're getting that ball rolling. And again, it's because of people like you talking about these topics, explaining it, breaking it down, helping people understand what does it look like to implement, what are the costs associated with it, and what are the returns. Oh, streamlined project management, better communication, preventing clash, having better phasing of the projects, shorter timelines because you're doing multiple responsibilities. You're laying your foundation, but you're also fabricating at the same time, and then you're just transporting to the job site. So now you have better safety and adherence to building codes. There's just so many benefits. And I think once more real estate developers start to recognize that, I won't even have to ask the question. They'll say, we're ready. We have the data. We're ready to, digitize and tokenize.
And it's real funny that you compare it to safety because I compare it to safety. Because safety, you're going to spend that money up front in hopes that you never have an incident, right? In BIM, you're going to spend that money up front so you never have rework, right? It's more of a savings than it is value add. It's almost more of an insurance that things are going to go better than what they would have if you didn't use it. Right. So it's real funny to hear you say safety in there. It's very similar to me as well.
Well, if we want to make an interesting segue, one topic we didn't touch on was unions. I believe that you are a union member and an ambassador of unions in general, and safeties and proper pay and just having satisfied employees, a big part of that. Real quickly, what was your story to joining a union and why do you continue to advocate for unions?
So my story was that I was working for a non-union contractor. I was kind of assistant foreman, right? I had worked up to where they trusted me enough that they would give me tasks in a little crew and send me out. They wound up laying me off and keeping a bunch of people that I had trained because they were a little bit cheaper. Mm-hmm. When that happened, we were all working in a semiconductor plant together, and some of the union hands had, that you just say hi to because you recognize them working in the same area. Some of them had started asking me why I didn't go union. And I told them, well, I wasn't raised to be union. My dad hates the union. My dad didn't talk to me for 3 weeks after I joined, right? But regardless, I was not raised to be union. And the main point that they brought home was, we're all out here working for the same company that we're building things for, right? We're all doing the same type of work. I was pipe fitting at that time. So I was a non-union hand working next to union hands doing the same exact work, and they were making almost twice as much as I was. And I asked them how that worked. How come they can make that amount of money? And it was explained to me like this. We're all going after the same jobs. Union, non-union doesn't matter to the general contractor, right? They honestly don't care. What matters is your safety record, right? And getting the job done to the general contractor. So if we're all going after the same things, we all have to buy the same safety equipment. We all need these trucks. We all buy this piping. We all use these fittings. Where is the extra money that's going to the union hands that's not going to the non-union hands? Right? So, and it's really funny because there's a very, very rough stigma that at union hands, a fat cat sitting back, smoking his cigar, doing what he can, lining his own pockets. Come to find out, it's honestly the opposite, right? Because a union contractor spends more money on their guys, right? There's a 401k with a pension, with insurance that's all free to your union hand, costing the union contract. And it's pretty crazy the amount of money that the union contractor actually puts out in benefits for their guys that the non-union, non-signatory contractor does not. And that was kind of my deciding factor of, okay, the company is structured for the guys at the bottom line, for it to be more advantageous for the guys at the bottom line than the top. Whereas a regular company is structured opposite, where the guys at the top are, lining pockets and the guys at the bottom are having a rough time feeding families. And I absolutely never want to contribute to that. I would much rather make sure that everybody's taken care of rather than just me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
really great.
That's honestly why I did it, was, just to be fair, even and equal to the guys who actually do the work, who make the money for the company.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Very, very interesting perspective. I know a lot of people can't decide union or against unions, and, changes by industry, but I think in construction is a pretty obvious answer.
You would think, but, and it has
properly practiced unions.
There we go. Yes.
In methodology, of course, there's exceptions to the rules, and it's not always followed through,
unfortunately,
properly or correctly. But
if you could keep the politics,
right,
out of the union, it'd be excellent. It would be perfect. Mm-hmm. So some of those you gotta grin and bear it and bite your teeth, though. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's definitely the way that I want to go. It's the way that I would want my sons to be treated, right? When they get to this age, I want them treated with a little respect and paid what they're worth, breaking their back for somebody else, right? If that is the route that they go, I would prefer that they do it this way, where it's a little more fair.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
well, my last request to you, Ben, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
AZDCS.us. We do have that website up. B. Larson at AZDCS.us. Obviously, they can contact Matt Schneider or John Chambliss with LV8R Labs.
And I will have your LinkedIn in the show notes as well. I should point that out.
Perfect. Yes, there's also my LinkedIn. Just if anybody needs any help, that's kind of what I'm trying to build this company on, is just helping, right? We're not trying to soak anybody for extra liquidity. Just want to get out there and help.
Awesome. Well, that's a great, Ben. It's been a fantastic conversation talking about BIM, CAD, and best practices. Really such a wealth of knowledge coming from you. And I encourage people to scroll back, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and just re-listen to little segments of this and absorb it, because not too many people are having this conversation, but it is, we would agree, the future of real estate. And so it's better for people to hear it now, maybe become an early adopter.
Early bird gets the worm. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Ben. And, thank you for everyone who has listened to us today on this episode of Coding Concrete. So Ben, wishing you a good rest of your day and a happy new year now that we've started.
You too. Appreciate it very much, Matt. Thanks for having me as a guest on here, and let's keep going.
Right on. All right. Take care now.
You too. Thank you.